In this video, I would like to talk about a personal theory of mine about the Nirvana song Sliver. That theory is that the song might be about child sexual abuse and might be autobiographical. Now, YouTube is pretty strict about including songs in your videos, perhaps particularly when it's, a famous band. So I'm not going to include any clips from it. I would recommend, if you're not familiar with the song, I would recommend seeking it out and listening to it first, because otherwise this video isn't going to make a lot of sense. I'm going to assume that you know the song and you're familiar with the lyrics. I don't think this is a theory that can ever really be confirmed or refuted. Obviously, Kurt Cobain is dead, and if someone said, yes, Kurt told me that he was abused as a child and that the song Sliver is about that, that would be quite unusual, and they might not even be believed anyway. They might not be telling the truth. So even if that happened, that wouldn't settle the issue, I don't think. Certainly, Cobain never said anything that hinted that this might be the case. Quite the opposite, actually. He describes it as an experiment in dynamics and simplicity. That was a 1992 quote. But of course, people who have been abused aren't always comfortable talking about that fact. And so the fact that he spoke about the song as if it was just a pop song and the lyrics didn't mean anything doesn't in itself mean that that is the case. The lyrics are about a child who is taken to their grandparents' house, doesn't want to go, screams, watches TV and falls asleep and wakes up in his mother's arms. And it's never really explained why the kid was so desperate not to go to his grandparents' house, or Grandpa Joe's house, as is described in the song. And it seems like there's something missing. The description of sort of trauma and not wanting to go, and then it's never addressed as to why that's the case. And we know that, of course, Kurt Cobain had very severe depression. I've never found the theories that Courtney Love had him killed or killed him herself particularly convincing. But even if that's the case, even if he didn't kill himself, he was still very, very depressive, and he was still, a heroin addict, which is often a response to depression. He was still pretty close to suicidal, even if he didn't actually commit suicide. And there doesn't seem to be any real explanation of why that was the case. Obviously, he was enormously successful. He was in a position which thousands or millions of people were trying to get into, and he was the one person in that thousands of millions of people who was in that position. He clearly didn't have a depressing life, and yet he clearly was enormously depressed, enormously unhappy, enormously traumatized by something. And of course, the fact that I've got an explanation doesn't prove that that is the explanation. There are many false explanations that fit the facts. But it seems to me to at least be worth considering. I don't think anyone's ever really properly explained why Kurt Cobain was the way that he was. I think we perhaps tend to have a sort of idea that that's just how rock stars are. We had this idea of the 27 Club, and rock stars die too young, and they party hard, and a lot of them suffer from it, etc., etc. But those aren't explanations. That's just a statement about a thing that happens, and it isn't even a very good statement about a thing that happens, because yes, there are a few people who die young and are rock stars, but most rock stars don't. It's not typical for rock stars to be miserable heroin addicts who die young. We sort of treat it as if as if it were, as if, well, that's just how rock stars are. It actually isn't how rock stars are. And even if it was how rock stars are, that wouldn't be an explanation of why they are like that. It's still the case that you need to explain why someone chooses to commit suicide. And again, even if you accept that he didn't really commit suicide, which again, I don't, I've never been particularly convinced by it. The evidence for it seems to be I don't like Courtney Love, more or less. But even if that were true, heroin is kind of a way of committing suicide, isn't it? It's a way of slowly committing suicide, perhaps. It's certainly a decision that your continued long life isn't of primary importance to you. And what would we call that if not a decision to commit suicide? So I think it's, as I say, I know that there's a lot of people who go through song lyrics and trying to find coded references to the person that wrote the song, and most of that is bullshit. One of my favourites is a woman who is convinced that Morrissey of the Smiths psychically predicted the death of Princess Diana, and virtually every Smith song and every Morrissey solo song is, as far as she's concerned, a coded reference to the death of Princess Diana or some other element of her life. But I think this is a little bit more than that. It's not based on an odd phrase or a word here or there or something like that. It's there is a song that doesn't seem to be what its author or composer said it was. So lyrically, it doesn't seem to be that. And we do have the mystery of Kurt Cobain's life. Why was he like that? Because it is a mystery. It's not just that's what rock stars do, and I think that's the lazy response that a lot of people have. I think it's a bit more, I think I'm speculating. I'm not saying case closed by any means, but I think I'm doing a little bit more than just going, oh, that's an odd phrase in a song, and therefore I'm constructing a whole life theory about a person from that. But, you may disagree. Let me know in the comments what you think, I suppose.